Welcome to DECIDEthought. I am your host today, John Heemeyer. Today's episode will be a little different than most. While we will be looking at time travel, we will be looking at it through the lens of a television series. In this case, specifically Dragon Ball. Please understand that television-based episodes will be rare, and we will always focus on a specific subject which the series also contends with. Time travel is a common concept in science fiction and fantasy, and most stories have their own unique take on it, due mostly to assumptions about time travel, seeing as how nobody in real life has successfully done so and returned with knowledge of how it works. Fortunately, most of these stories follow certain combinations of possible aspects of time travel. These aspects include dynamic time. This is where when there's a single timeline and time travel to the past will change the future of the one who traveled. For example, CW's The Flash. Rewriting time. This is when there's a single timeline and where making a change in the past affects the future and thus affects the person who made the change. Think the movie Back to the Future. Branching time. This is where time travel to the past and making a change creates an alternate timeline, such as in the Dragon Ball series. Immutable time. This is when there's a single timeline and traveling to the past can't change anything because you were already in the past originally. Think the movie Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Fractured time. This is when time travel to the past sends you to a different timeline where you always traveled to that point in time. One possibility in multiverse theory explains this as for every choice you can make, there is a timeline where you did make that choice. Personal time. This is when time travel cannot change who you are, since each individual carries their own personal timeline with them when they travel. Think the MCU. Today we are viewing time travel from Dragon Ball's perspective. In the Dragon Ball series, we are dealing with multiple forms of time travel depending on how that time travel is achieved. In doing so, we will explain how these types of time travel affect timelines, different ways in which Dragon Ball's time range can be explained, and any plot holes or paradoxes that are found. First off, let's look at how Dragon Ball makes time travel happen. There are currently 4 methods of time travel in the Dragon Ball universe. Number 1, Whis has a do-over ability, a 3-minute rewind. This is a personal time jump which carries the timelines of all those who traveled to nudge time's course, thus not causing a branch in timelines. Number 2, time rings allow the wearer to travel forward in time and return. It is unclear if after the return, any changes in actions would alter the future that they saw. None of the time rings seen are explained as having been caused by another time ring. As witnessed in the Goku Black arc, a time ring can also follow the travel of a time machine. It is therefore likely time rings are an immutable time form of time jump. Number 3, Hit and apparently a few rare others have a time skip technique that lets them jump forward in time by fractions of a second in an instant. As this is a one-way time travel, there is no effect on the timeline. And finally, number 4, time machines are the most common form of time travel seen and appear to be the main source of the time tranches, and thus the green time rings. Trunks' time machine has shown that it can create a branching timeline, but will still return to its home timeline when they do return to the future. So, how do each of these methods of time travel work? Well, scientifically speaking, it's unknown and unexplained in the series. But we can make some educated guesses based off the visuals given. Number 1, Whis' time travel appears to actually rewind time.
I possess the ability to turn back time. Occasionally, I must use it, like when my lord accidentally destroys our system's star. I manipulate the temporal dimension a little bit. Then I go back in time and bop him on the head before he has the opportunity to make his mistake. The catch is that you'll have to act fast. 3 minutes back is all I can manage. Let's go.
Likely the main reason it doesn't cause branches in time when that method is used. 2. The time rings themselves appear to jump in time, vanishing from one point to appear in another point in the same timeline. When following damage to the time stream, this jump is shown to have a rubber banding effect.
That pulse! The distortion in space-time must be dissipating. It's going back to normal.
That machine created a considerable warp in the space-time as it passed through it. And that time ring reacted to the warp, pulling black to this time somewhat like a planet spiraling down into a gravity well. As the disturbance subsided and space-time returned to its former state, the pull ceased too. So, like a marble in a drawn slingshot, when the pulling force let go, black was launched back into the time from which he came. No more pull, so no more black. You might say he ran out of time.
So I'm back to the future.
This effect explains why they return so very closely to the same point in time in which they left, and explains why Goku Black couldn't control it when he followed the damage in space-time. Number 3, Hit's time skip appears to pause time, allowing him alone to move in the frozen time for the duration of his skip. This is further shown and semi-explained to be in a pocket dimension.
It's true. There's no one in here. Keep looking. They gotta be close by. I've come to kill you.
Huh? Oh yeah, and who are you supposed to be?
If you must know, I'm Hit.
What are you morons waiting for? Shoot the bastard! Are you deaf? Come on, move it!
It's no use. Time has stopped for everyone except you and me.
But he doesn't actually stop it. To be exact, he can skip ahead in time. Hit can store up all the time he skips over.
Hold on. Store it? How?
In a temporary space-time parallel to ours. You might think of it as a pocket dimension.
There's no way! He's shattering the pocket thingy!
Number 4. The time machine itself gives visuals that indicate a folding of space-time to travel the time axis rather than the space axis. Which would be more of a wormhole Einstein-Rosen bridge. Now to look at the in-universe effects of time travel. Since Whis' do-over, the time rings, and time skipping have no apparent effect on the timelines, that simply leaves the time machine itself, but takes the time rings to explain what happens. When first seen, there are 5 time rings, 1 silver and 4 green. The green time rings are explained as being instances of time travel that caused a branch in the timeline. At the end of the Black Zamazu arc, a 5th green time ring is shown. So, we now know that the current timeline is shown in silver, but what about the other timelines? Well, there are a few options here, but let's take a look at the timelines in order. According to the manga, the first green time ring was created by somebody in the 12th universe. Since the time rings we see are from the 10th universe, this implies that a branch in timelines affects all universes simultaneously. So we'll start with this assumption. We now have an original timeline and an unknown timeline. The original timeline is the timeline where androids 17 and 18 took over the world, Trunks destroyed them, and Trunks was subsequently defeated by Future Cell. The second time branch occurred when Trunks went to the past and gave Goku the hard medicine, leading to the Android Saga arc. The third time branch occurs when Trunks returns to the past and assists with the Android Saga. The fourth time branch occurs when Future Cell, from the main timeline, jumps back and starts the Cell Saga. The fifth and final green time ring happens when Beerus erases Zamasu. Most will think we're all done, right? Wrong! This method has a number of holes in it. First off, thanks to the Cell games, after Trunks went to the future, he defeated Future Cell before that Cell could travel back to start the Cell games. So where is the No Cell Saga timeline? In addition, we now have 2 future timelines. One where Cell left and one where Cell was defeated. That's one more missing time ring. Third, we said he could return Trunks and Mai earlier in their timeline and have their Beerus stop Zamasu, creating yet another branch. That's 3 missing time rings. Finally, what about the Dragon Ball GT series and the video games, the Xenoverse? What about those timelines? Even if we assume Xenoverse to be the unknown timeline created by Universe 12, that still leaves one additional missing time ring. How do we explain these missing time rings? Well, there's a few possibilities. Number 1, the time rings we see might only show the timelines that exist at the point in time along those timelines. This will explain why the additional future timelines are not represented. Number 2, we returning Trunks and Mai to an earlier point in the future happens chronologically after the 5th green time ring is added. So, along with number 1, it is explained. 3, the No Cell Saga timeline is not a branch timeline. It is a created timeline. It can only occur after the Cell Saga happens, and only if the Cell Saga happens. Thus, there's no branch, but rather an entirely new timeline created. The green timelines are described and only declared to show branches in the time stream. It is possible that there is another color of time ring which even the Kais don't know about, or that the time rings can only be created by a branch in the timeline, meaning that a created timeline will be unknown to the Kai. Number 4, GT is considered non-canon, so no time ring. But is it? The explanation of its retconning is that Beerus woke up seeking a Super Saiyan God. Consider for a moment that somebody tampered with time and sent Beerus and the Oracle Fish this vision. This will still mean an unexplained missing time ring. On a side note, while we might not see Goku or Vegeta go through Dragon Ball GT's Super Saiyan 4 transformation, that doesn't mean the universe 6 Saiyans won't reach that transformation instead of Super Saiyan God. Number 5. Even though Xenoverse could be considered the Universe 12 created time branch, it too is non-canon. In addition, it would have multiple time branches within it that aren't represented. Fortunately, Xenoverse gives its own potential explanation for why these time branches don't show within the time rings, namely Chronoa, the supreme Kai of time. The Xenoverse time stream will follow the timelines that exist at that point in time rule, number 1, due to it starting in future Trunks' future. More importantly, since this happens in the future, Xeno, the angels, or the Kai might see all the time rings and decide that they need someone whose job it is to specifically ensure no further branches in the timeline. Thus, Chronoa becomes the supreme Kai of time, and works with the Time Patrol to prevent the time branches by time traveling to stop changes in the past before they become big enough to branch time. Dragon Ball Super opens this possibility when Zamasu is talking to Vegeta.
Only a select few deities are allowed to manipulate time.
This comment is often seen to mean select gods, only supreme Kais, of each universe can manipulate time. But Chronoa is a supreme Kai. She's the supreme Kai of time. This means multiple supreme Kai can exist in a universe simultaneously. So Chronoa is a possibility in the future of future Dragon Ball canon. With all this information, we now can call our first timeline option, or time shard, we like the sound of that, the true canon, concurrent, branching only time shard. But there are other possible ways to explain the time rings depending on these variables. To do this, let's look at all the timelines at once. Clearly, there are way too many timelines to work within the given amount of green time rings. Assuming that the time rings we see are the timelines at that point in time, the concurrent variable, we can mark those as not happened yet, so not recorded. Next, we can look at the Dragon Ball Z time jumps. If we assume that after Trunks' first time jump to give Goku the heart medicine, all the rest of the time jumps must happen, making an immutable portion of the timeline, we cut out a fair number of potential timelines. Now, we assume Dragon Ball GT is canon, and the retcon was a time shift causing another branch in time. And we can place the Xenoverse timeline in as either Universe 12's time shift branch, or we can consider that since Xenoverse starts in the future of future Trunks, it fits under the not happened yet, so not a recorded category. Now we have a full canon, concurrent, all timelines time shard, which accounts for, well, all timelines. But what if we want to keep the non-canon, well, non-canon? Well, since they're non-canon, let's simply erase those timelines. Now, to make this fit the time rings, let's assume that a created timeline, such as the No Cell Saga timeline, doesn't count. With this, we can now place the 4th and 5th green time rings as being the branches in the future time. It works, right? No, not quite. Look at it if we go back to prior to when Beerus erased Zamasu. Turns out we need the No Cell Saga timeline, so let's put it back in. And it fits this pre-erasure requirement. Put the post-erasure back in, and okay, now we have an extra time branch, or do we? Chronologically speaking, the time branch of Trunks and Mai going to an earlier point in the future has not happened by the time we see the 6 time rings. Even though it is a future timeline, it is a future timeline that isn't created until after we view the new time ring, while the other future timelines were created before we saw the time rings. So technically, it can still fit. Though, for the previously stated reasons, this does still allow for the Xenoverse timeline to exist and become canon, since it is even further in the future than the current future we are aware of. But as it is not currently canon, it is not shown. This option is a true canon, chronological, all timelines time shot. Which one is the actual method Akira Toriyama is using? The fact that there are still multiple possibilities means that there's still story to tell in Dragon Ball about time travel. We'll just have to wait until the next Dragon Ball time arc to continue narrowing it down. Until then, the choice of which time chart is true, well, that's up to you to decide.